So welcome, ladies, gents, and ladies and gents connected live, and even those catching the replay later. I'm happy to be back. We took a long break, it felt like, right? With the feast days, we had Passover on unleavened bread. Alina did the beautiful task of teaching us on the feast days of Passover and unleavened bread, and it was beautiful. I did enjoy the break, I'm not gonna lie, of teaching. I know before those 2 weeks, Yasmin had taught, I believe, no, mentira, it was me.
Yeah.
I had taught. Yes, but if I don't know, for some reason it feels like it's been like a zillion years.
Yeah.
So I am glad to be back doing what Abba called us to do, right? However, it does feel good to take a break every once in a while and focus on new things. I'm focused on new things right now, transitioning to a new job, which all praises to Abba, he gave me more flexibility, which is something I was praying for. Y'all know I was getting stressed out. I was getting burned out these last few months. At the beginning, no, it was good, right? When I started off, it all worked like for a season, right? Like it was just like what I needed in that season. And then program closed. I transitioned into a different schedule. And at first it was all good, but then it was like, whoa, how am I gonna do life? So all praises to Abba, no conflict anymore, any longer. I am back to having more time so that I can prepare these studies for all of us and even for myself because when I teach, honestly, it's not just, and I'm sure you can, yes, you get filled as well. As a matter of fact, I feel that I learn more
Yes.
when I teach than when I sit down to receive. It's crazy, like because it's different putting things together so that you can interpret it for others, right? It's very different. And you have to literally digest, and it's like, there's another layer to this. Yes, yes. So I do encourage all of you at one point or another, even if you're not called to teach, take on the task because you'll learn a lot more.
Yes.
So having said all that, here we have chapter 21 in the beginning, and I'm going to give the disclaimer like I always do because I have a new person here in the house and another one connected live. So I always give this disclaimer. If this is too much, and it's okay, you don't have to feel overwhelmed. You don't have to be like, what are they saying? Remember, you're starting with us at chapter 21. We've been, cooking it up since chapter 1 of Genesis. So there's a lot of little details, like any good book that you have, even if you've heard about it before at church and sermons or whatever, it's not the same than when you digest, verse after verse after verse and make it, the full story and context. It's very different. And so you might feel a little lost. That's okay. I promise you, you'll get the hang of it. The more that you study with us and on your own, obviously, the more you'll see the full picture. And I do encourage you, go back and read yourself. And once again, I always post the recordings that we do every week. They're posted on YouTube from chapter 1 all the way through now. So you have time to catch up in case you have, and yes, I do agree. It's a lot of unlearning. Coming to these studies, it's sometimes a little bit like, whoa, where are they going with this? Perhaps not so much tonight's study. Tonight's study is pretty straight to the point. It's pretty basic, in my opinion. Not that the word is basic, but you know what I mean, compared to like Genesis 3 or or Genesis 6 or you know what I mean? Like compared to those, it's straight to the point. It's about a fulfillment of a promise that we've been studying from the beginning, right? So you might not be as lost. But I do encourage you, if you are up for a challenge, for your mind to be like, what? I encourage you go back and yes, I said a lot. So let's start. Let's begin tonight's study. We're going to go ahead and read fully chapter 21 of Genesis. And I am using the NKJV translation, but if you have a different one, it's okay. You're just going to have different words. And since you're new, I'm going to repeat it again. I do tend not to say God and Lord because they're just titles. I know you might be like, what? Believe me. Oh, oh, you did connect with us. Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, clock it. All right. So now you're here in person. Never mind. Okay. So now you understand. Me personally, I'm going to speak for myself. I don't like to just group them He is so mighty and powerful and like literally the most high God, right? To just diminish him to just God, right? Because Satan is a God as well. And so are the fallen angels. That's why they are the gods of this world, right? And we are ruled by the gods of this world. I know people will say, oh, but it's capital G versus it's God. It's a title, right? It literally means a mighty one, an angel, like an eternal being, right? And so yes, I don't like to just call him that. And that's just me. I'm not gonna be like, oh my gosh, she's like, how dare no, no. I just and then Lord itself is also a title. As you see, even David and other servants of the Most High are referred to as my Lord. Right? It's a form of respect, which is a good thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad Lord is not a bad thing, right? However, I just don't like to call him something that other people can be called by. Again, the Adon is normally what I use instead of Lord because the Adon is from Adonai, right? The Almighty, the Adon, like meaning the pre-incarnate Messiah. There's just a lot of little layers, but I hope I don't lose you all with me trying to switch up the names. That I just like to get in the habit of giving him the honor that he deserves. Okay, so nothing wrong with I'm not oh you were saying the wrong name. I'm not that person. With all due respect for those that are huge on the name topic, listen, at the end of the day, he's gonna reveal to us the day we meet face to face what his real name was. There's a lot of debates whether it is Yahweh or Yahuwah or Haya or I lean more towards a Haya, which is I am that I am, right? The I am. However, we don't know. He hasn't manifested himself here in front of like my name is, right? So yeah, I don't get into those name debates. Okay. So Genesis 21, we're gonna read. And I have it also here on the screen in case you want to follow along in this translation, but you guys can read from wherever you want. So and the Adon visited Sarah as he had said, and the Adon did for Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, and the set time of which the Most High had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 years old, as the Most High had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, the Most High had made me laugh, and all who hear will laugh with me. She also said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. Verse 8. So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. And the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But the Most High said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman because he is your seed. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water, and putting it on her shoulder, he gave it and the boy to Hagar and sent her away. Then she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the skin was used up, and she placed the boy under one of the shrubs. Then she went and sat down across from him at a distance of about a bow shot. For she said to herself, let me not see the death of the boy. So she sat opposite him and lifted her voice and wept. And the Most High heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of the Most High called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what ails you, Hagar? Fear not, For the Most High has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then the Most High opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink. So the Most High was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, for his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, The Most High is with you in all that you do. Now therefore, swear to me by the Most High that you will not deal falsely with me, with my offspring, or with my posterity, but that according to the kindness that I have done to you, you will do to me and to the land in which you have dwelt. And Abraham said, I will swear. Then Abraham rebuked Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servant had seized. And Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, nor had I heard nor had I heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. Verse 29, Then Abimelech asked Abraham, What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves? And he said, You will take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be my witness that I have dug this well. Therefore, he called the place Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath there. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. So Abimelech rose with Phicol, the commander of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there called on the name of the Adon, the everlasting Elohim. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines many days. Okay. So we see the portion Abimelech returns back into the picture here. We had spoken about him not too long ago. But before we get to the portion of Abimelech, which, by the way, I don't think it's by coincidence that it intertwines with this chapter, right? There's a reason. Everything about scriptures, there's a reason for the transitioning of everything. This is not just like Isaac is born, Ishmael sent away, then Abimelech came. It's not, it's more to it than that. It's more complex. Although we might not get to the nitty-gritty of the complexity, I still want to point out what I observe in these connections. So before we begin connecting precepts, I do want to just open up with the slides. And if you have any questions, those of you who are new or want to share anything, by all means, just share. And if those that are connected, you could either unmute yourself or type something up in the chat. Okay, perfect. So Genesis 21. The promise fulfilled, the separation made, the covenant established is basically, in summary, what this whole chapter is all about. After Abraham's failure with Abimelech in Genesis 20, what we studied a few weeks ago, right? Yes. We now see the faithfulness of the Most High contrasted against human weakness. Despite Abraham's inconsistency, the Most High remains faithful to his word. And why do I bring that up? Because I don't know if you guys remember, just a little summary and refresher, that chapter 20 dealt with Abraham doubting the fact that he would survive if he would have not said that Sarah was his sister, right? He didn't say she was his wife because of fear. And because of that, Abimelech was cursed because he took her on almost as a wife. And I say almost as a wife because we know the Most High protected her from becoming his wife, right? And so, however, Abimelech was like, livid, like, why would you do this to me? Like, take your woman, gosh, but now we see the return of Abimelech back here. And the point is that Genesis 21 marks a turning point. The promised seed arrives, which obviously is Isaac, right? I just want to make sure you guys are following. The bondwoman and her son are separated. Who's the bondwoman? I'm going to bring back the bondwoman because it's mentioned in not only in Genesis 21, but we're going to make reference with Galatians. because Paul later speak of this contrast between the free woman and the bondwoman, referring to Sarah and Hagar, right? And then the covenant line, which is through Isaac, is then clarified. We know from the very beginning, I've been saying it, we've been seeing it in scriptures, that the promise from the beginning was not meant for Ishmael. Ishmael was a son of the flesh. And what do I mean, a son of the flesh? A son of the flesh was because of the fact that they took matter in their own hands. They doubted I don't want to say they doubted the promise. They believed, because they're even counted, we read a few weeks ago in Hebrews 11, as the great man and woman, because Sarah as well, of faith, right? So it's not that they doubted the promise or the covenant. However, they thought it was the way they were going to do it, right? At one point, they were like, well, we're only getting older. Clearly, it's not me. Sarah thought probably, so use my maiden, right? Like my maid. She'll be my womb because she's my maid, and therefore here's your promise. So it's not that they doubted the promise, it's just the means about it. They weren't patient enough to wait, right? And so because of that, he ends up being a son of the flesh, meaning not of the spirit. It wasn't of faith, right? It was of the flesh. So because of that, there's that separation between the free woman, meaning giving the son of faith, Isaac, and then the bondwoman, the son of flesh. And that's how Paul makes a distinction later on in the book of Galatians, speaking about the two covenants as well. So again, the covenant line was always supposed to be through Isaac, the son of faith, through faith, through the impossibilities, through something that was not humanly possible. He had to believe, like at 100 years old, and Sarah, what, 90, 91 already? I lost count, to actually bear the fruit of his womb, like of his seed, I'm sorry, in her womb. And so, which is impossible, like biologically impossible. We know that a woman after 50, sometimes even before, I don't know, stops producing eggs. You know what I mean? So it's humanly impossible. But Abba, he just works like that. He likes to show off, like the way he brought Messiah, for example. Like, yeah, let me just show you how it's done. Anyway, so this chapter is not just historical, it's deeply prophetic, pointing toward, speaking of our Messiah, pointing toward our Messiah, and the promise versus flesh contrast, right? So having said that introduction, I'm going to go ahead now and connect some, well, I'll leave it at that. We're going to go connect some Bible verses to verse 1, where it says, and the Adon visited Sarah as he had said. Again, it was a promise. And the Adon did for Sarah as he had spoken. So connecting with that, we have 1 Samuel 2:21. And the Adon visited Hannah. You guys remember the story of Hannah? She was also barren. Okay, so that she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Adon. So once again, her womb was closed, and we know that Hannah is the mother of the very famous prophet Samuel, which is the prophet that came right before King David, right? That's just another story to point out how he would visit to fulfill a promise, right? Genesis 17:16, as well as verses 19 through 21 reads, and here goes back to the promise. We're backtracking. So I'm going to include a lot of Genesis, what we've already covered, to just point back to the prophecies, okay? It says, and I will bless her and also give you a son by her, meaning by Sarah. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her. Then the Most High said, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear, that's skipping to verse 19 over here. So the Most High said, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year. And going back a little bit, chapter 17 was about him saying, like, but what about Ishmael? What about him? So we know that from the beginning, even though that was his own doing, the Most High was very gracious and mercy. Like, don't worry, I'll bless him. I'll give him. As a matter of fact, he ends up being part of the promise. through faith later on, through Messiah. However, the seed, the righteous seed, was through Isaac. That was the son of the promise through faith. I don't know if that makes sense, but I want to start connecting. So Genesis 18:10, as well as verse 14. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. And behold, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. In verse 14, is anything too hard for the Adon? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Again, confirming the promises. We also then see in Galatians chapter 4, this is Paul now in the New Testament, chapter 4, verse 23 and 28, it says, but he who was of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise. Now, we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of promise. And he there, obviously speaking to the Galatians, who were not Israelites, meaning of the flesh. So I always point back to that because a lot of people will kind of like read that and miss the fact that Galatians were originally a pagan nation, meaning they were Gentiles, a Gentile nation. But he refers to them as sons of Isaac, meaning of the promise, because it is through faith. In other words, once you receive Messiah, you are grafted in to the same people of promise. It's about faith. It was never about bloodline. Yeah. Think about it this way. If it would have been about bloodline, then Ishmael would have been the seed, because he's direct bloodline to Abraham. Do you understand now? It was never about physical bloodline. Therefore, that's why Abraham was to be the father of many nations. Father. Yes.
I know, like it says that Isaac is a promised seed, and then we see that he got circumcised on the 8th day.
We're gonna go
but
there.
We also see Messiah too.
I love how I love how she's always connecting ahead. And it's like poof. I love it. Yes. So Isaac, and I'm gonna show it later in the slides as well. Isaac is a prototype of Messiah, a foreshadow of Messiah as the seed of faith. In so many levels. We're gonna get to in so many levels. However, like you were saying, it all began with Isaac, with the circumcision. He was the first one, again, and I'm going to repeat myself later, but because you brought it up already, he was the first one to be circumcised on the 8th day and as a child, like as a baby, because everyone else was circumcised old. Okay. Ishmael was 13 when he was circumcised, right? Because that's when they enter the covenant, like where they circumcise all the males. But anyway, let's continue. So connecting now verse 2. For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the set time of which the Most High had spoken to him. Connecting again, Acts 7 verse 8. Then he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him, speaking of that, on the 8th day. And Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs. And so here is where we see the beginning of a seed that expands to become Israel. We know Jacob is later renamed Israel. Do you guys see it now? But it's about faith. So go ahead.
About the expansion of the seed, I was thinking about a tree, how the tree literally has branches, and then it has leaves, and then it has many, many, many leaves, and I really saw a tree. Yes.
And like Paul, we always go back to Paul does a beautiful job at explaining the whole tree metaphor, right? Yeah. Romans 11, he goes back to showing, basically pointing back, Messiah is the tree of life, right? He is the tree. Israel, as the direct seed of Messiah through the promise of Isaac, right, is the cultivated olive tree. And so as the cultivated olive tree, Paul shows how the unbelieving branches, meaning the ones that don't believe in the tree of life, right? They don't believe in that. They are cut off. Cut off. So it's not about bloodline, okay? And the ones that believe are grafted in. I don't know if you've ever seen a tree being grafted in. It's basically grabbing a branch from another tree and making it part of that tree until it blends in into that tree. So that's what Paul is basically saying. Unbelieving branches are cut off. Believing branches that are not part of the original tree, if they believe, they are grafted in. So the tree of Messiah is basically composed of believing original branches and believing wild branches, meaning they did not belong. They were Gentiles by nature, right? Grafted in, that's what Israel is. That's the seed of faith, which is why Paul in the book of Galatians, let's read it. Galatians 4, verse 22 says, Oop, for it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman. What is this saying? Hebrews 11, oh my goodness, Hebrews 11, verses 11 through 12. By faith, okay. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed. And she bore a child, and she was past the age because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, as him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in the multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. And that's the whole point. That was the metaphor of this expansion for Abraham. The children come by faith. There is no way on earth that through your bloodline they're going to be innumerable as the sky, as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. It is through faith. That's why it says by faith. It was the son of faith who initiated this, because how do we get saved? By believing, through believing faith. Obviously, we know that faith will lead you to do the actions, the works, right? But it starts with believing. You have to believe to be grafted in. So how is it then that we have a whole bunch of people who are of bloodline of the tree, but they don't believe nor accept, but yet they're still his special people? If Paul is very clear about they're cut off. And it's not to say that they're not able to be regrafted in if they believe. And that's the difference. Again, Genesis, and this is still connecting with verse 2, Genesis 17, verse 21, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac from Sarah, whom Sarah shall bear to you at the set time next year. Genesis 18:19, for I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Adon to do righteousness and justice, that the Adon may bring to Abraham what he had spoken to him. And the purpose of all this was to bring back a people back into his perfect covenant, obeying his right rulings. Genesis, Genesis 18, verse 14. Why am I missing here? I only put verse 14, but I was supposed to also include, I think, verse 9, but whatever. Is saying, is anything too hard for the Adon? At the appointed time, I will return to you according, oh, well, I have read that already. Okay, so Galatians 4:4. But when the fullness of the time had come, the Most High sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. And this is speaking now of Messiah, right? So it's the same foreshadow of Isaac. It's the same foreshadow following a specific. And here in Galatians, a lot of people were like, what do you mean born under the law? He was born under the law because he was born in the times where the Levitical law was still in place. Okay? This law right here is not just his law, the moral law, how many people would like to call it, or the eternal covenant law. This is speaking about a Levitical law. And that's another thing. Our Bibles have blended words. Like law, they make it just one word when there's three different kinds of law. And then when you read it in context, you see which one's which. There's the law, which was the Levitical, which was temporary, only during the times of the Levites until Messiah became the high priest, right? And then there's his law, his perfect Torah, which is eternal. And there's also the law of, I want to call it Judaism, which is based on traditions of men. Yes, and that's the one that Messiah went hardcore against. Okay, so there's three laws. So let's not group them together in one word. It's very deceiving when you read without context. Very deceiving. You'll fall under the lawless one, which is the Antichrist. Just see. All right. So connecting with verse 3, we have, and Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah born to him, Isaac. We have just a refresher, Genesis 17, 19, and 21. Then the Most High said, no, Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. By my covenant, I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear. And I had already read that. All right, let's continue. Verse 4. Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as the Most High had commanded him. Let's connect. Acts 7:8. Then he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day, and Isaac begot Jacob. We had read this, but this just, I like being redundant sometimes, okay? Genesis 17, 10 and 12. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. Verse 12. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. So notice that the covenant was not only for bloodline from Abraham's seed, even those that were foreigners, meaning Gentiles, as long as they were became part of his family. Okay, so you see a lot of connections from the beginning, how this was not a last name deal. This is not just the Abrahamic line, bloodline, how people would like to call it, right? We also see Leviticus 12:3, and on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And again, there's a lot of connections on the 8th day. I did a study on the feast day of the great 8th day. And there's just so much with that. 8 symbolizes eternity. It's the infinity number, right?
Yeah.
And so it symbolizes eternity. We know that speaking in terms of biblical years, we have day 1 through day 7. A day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day, says in Peter. I'm paraphrasing, but what do I mean by this? Creation happened in 7 days. On the 7th day, he rested, right? And it stopped there because after that was the fall of man. The 8th day never came. I don't know if y'all following me with this.
Yeah.
The 8th day never came in creation. Now, we have year 1,000, year 2,000, year 3,000, 4,000, Messiah comes. Fast forward, we are, obviously they've mixed up the calendars and the times and the years and whatever, but roughly they say we are close to year 6,000, which I think it's more. But anyhow, let's say 2,000 years after he came, we are roughly at around year 6,000. Again, I think it's more. I think it's closer to year 7,000. The year 7,000, because the millennial reign is when he comes to reign for 1,000 years. I don't know if you guys are following me with this. He returns on day 7. I don't know if you guys remember. Yeah, he returns on the 7,000 year of his calendar, not our Gregorian time frame. Okay, 7,000 year to reign for 1,000 years. Do the math. That leads you to year 8,000 when it's over. 8,000 or day 8 represents eternity. Represents we make it. Represents we are given, as Revelation says, a new name and a new stone, meaning new garments, meaning we go eternally glorified as angels, what we were supposed to be from the beginning. Okay? Anyway, prayerfully we make it, right? That's the hope. That's the desire, and that's what we're striving for. Is it easy? No, it's not. It's hard. But thankfully we have his grace that guides us and helps us endure this race. All right, let's continue so that we can make it at least to the 7th day, right? The goal is until the 8th day, but the 7th day, so because he will reign here with us. And I think at that point, man, if you don't get it, you don't get it. All right, let's continue. Verse 5, where it says, those that are connected live, by the way, if you guys want to share any questions, please feel free to share. I'm trying to take my time here so new people understand. So verse 5, where it says, now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. I'm not gonna, I mean, we have Genesis 17. That's just confirming that he was indeed 100 years old. So I'm not gonna read that. You can put it for your notes. Now, verse 6. where it says, and Sarah said, the Most High has made me laugh, and all who hear will laugh with me. That's our canon Bible, right? Our Masoretic text renders that he made me laugh, right? And all who hear will laugh with me. I want to read the same verse in the Septuagint, which is a much older translation coming directly from the Greek. Um, and this is how it reads. And Sarah said, the Adon has made laughter for me. For whoever shall hear shall rejoice with me. So it reads a little different and it leads to understand that she wasn't necessarily laughing, doubting. Okay. So that I always like to bring different translations. So, like, meaning even older translations than our regular text. So we can more understand. So, why the name Isaac, right? And which is joy, which comes from him. We also have connecting with that same verse, Genesis 21. No, that's Genesis 18, verse 13. And the Adon said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I surely bear a child since I am old? I already did this study. I'm not gonna go back to it, but basically we read from the Septuagint and even the Targums, I believe it, and we kind of are more leaning towards the belief that she wasn't laughing doubtfully. It was more so like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Like, is this really happening? Like, but anyway, that's just our interpretation. Psalms 126, verse 2, then our mouth was filled with laughter. And again, connecting with laughter and our tongue with singing. Then they said among the nations, the Adon has done great things for them. So that's kind of like the spirit I see Sarah having, right? That same attitude. Yes.
Say that like blessing doesn't bring sorrow.
Yeah.
So like it makes sense that like it was more like in a joyful way, bless you.
Yeah. And if you think about it, that's what his name literally means. Isaac's name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he laughed like
Yeah,
joy.
yeah. So I don't think it's about coincidence. Isaiah 54:1, sing, O barren, you who have not born, break forth into singing and cry out loud, you who have not labored with child, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married woman, says the Adon. And again, we're talking about a prophecy that is a metaphor. However, within the metaphor, you see the same connection of when you are barren and you bear a child, you're going to break forth singing and crying and oh my God, I'm like 90 years old. That's just some of that. You know what I mean? Okay, so Luke 158. When her neighbors and relatives heard how the Adon had shown great mercy to her, they rejoiced with her. And again, I think this is in regards to Elizabeth, because she was also bearing the cousin of Mary, and she conceived another prophecy. She's the mother of John the Baptist. Okay, so we also have connecting with verse 7. As you see, we go literally line by line. She also said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. So you see, this is more to me pointing that she's rejoicing. She's like, oh my goodness, it's being fulfilled. And just for records, your records, just Genesis 18:11 through 12 is the verse that shows when she literally laughed. So connecting with verse 9. I'm gonna skip 8. I'm gonna go to 9, where it says, and Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. So here in our regular text, we see it as scoffing, kind of like that he was like messing with Isaac, basically, right? In the Septuagint, and I'm going to also read it from the Targums, we see differences. And I want to read all of it to come to a conclusion of really what was taking place. So in the Septuagint, verse 9 reads, and Sarah, having seen the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, who was born to Abraham, sporting with Isaac, her son. Here, sporting is more like playing with him. Okay? However, look how the Targum renders. So this sporting with Isaac could be playing, but it could be playing in a negative way too, because coughing, playing, like you mess, like in plain English, like messing with him. That's kind of like how I take it, right? Like messing with him. But look how the Targum renders. Targums, by the way, it's a even much older text coming directly from Aramaic, which has been way less manhandled than our regular text. So a lot of the Targum literally means translation. Okay. So, yes, there's a lot more details here. Verse 9 in the Targums. And Sarah observed, check this out, the son of Hagar, the Mizrahi, that's Egyptian, by the way, whom she bare to Abraham, mocking with a strange worship and bowing to the Adon. So here in the Targums, it makes it more clear that it wasn't just playing around like he was being rude. Yeah. And more than rude, it had a strange worship mixed to it. Okay. So Sarah, in other words, had a reason to be offended. Like, I don't want this guy around my son. I don't want, I'm sorry he's your kid, but this is the seed of faith, and I don't want him to corrupt it, you know? So I don't know what to do. I don't want him in the same households, basically. She didn't say kill him. She just said remove him from here. I don't want them being raised right now together, right? That's basically what took place. And I basically understood more after reading the different translations where Sarah was coming from, okay? We also see, connecting to that same verse 9, Genesis chapter 16, what had happened prior. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid servant. That was her maid, right? Hagar, whose name was Hagar. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, meaning Hagar, right? Her mistress became despised in her eyes. In other words, she started acting all stuck up like she was better than Sarah. And that was unheard of, especially in those days. Like your role here is that this is your boss, you are the employee. Okay? Yeah. Like, yeah, understand the ranks. Understand the ranks. Yes, you are being used as a womb, right? To serve your boss. Like you're not the boss now just because you offered your womb. And that's basically what had happened. So verse 15, so Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore Ishmael. So that's just recapping what had happened. So we see Galatians 4:29, but as he who was born according to the flesh, then persecuted him, and that confirms the Targums, by the way. Paul says, he persecuted him, meaning Isaac, who was born according to the Spirit, even so it is now. Ooh, so we see how the Bible can, like, the whole picture brings clarity. Old with new, it's just one book. Okay. And so Paul makes it very clear. He was persecuted. He was trying to mock the seed, right? That was the seed of jealousy. And then it's still today in this age. Those who are not the seed, meaning they're seed of the flesh, who are not being grafted in through the Spirit, right? They're mocking those of the Spirit. Does that make sense? That's why Paul says, even so it is now. It was in the times of Paul. It is even more so now today. Just saying, just saying. All right, verse 10, where it says, therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. In other words, he gonna mess up my seed, boy. Like, take him out. Take him out. That's basically what she was saying. And we see how the matter was displeasing to Abraham. In other words, because that was his son as well. He loves Ishmael, right? He's like, I'm not gonna kick him out of my house. Like, woman, simmer down. But all right, let's make some let's make some connections with verse 10 as well as verse 11. Yeah. Yeah, let's make connections to both. Genesis 25:6, but Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had. And while he was still living, he sent them eastward away from Isaac, his son, to the country to the east. So notice how even later on, okay, where Abraham eventually has more sons too. He has more children. He didn't just stay with Isaac, by the way. That's another thing a lot of people don't understand. There were other children besides Ishmael. But notice how he kept them separate from Isaac, right? Yeah. In other words, he's preserving a seed of faith separate. All right. So Genesis 36:6-7, that Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the persons of his household, his cattle and all his animals, and all his goods, which he had gained in the land of Canaan, and went to a country away from the presence of his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together, and the land where they were strangers could not support them because of their livestock. Obviously, this is speaking later on about Jacob and Esau, but it's a great example of how there's always going to be like two brothers, you know, and like even with Abraham and Lot, and how there's always going to be like a separation. Yeah, that's what I just said.
Yeah.
That's what we just read here in Genesis 36. Yes. Galatians 3:18. For in the inheritance is of the law. It is no longer of promise, but the Most High gave it to Abraham by promise. Again, it's all about a covenant of faith. Galatians 4:30. Nevertheless, what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. And again, Paul here is quoting literally what we just read in Genesis 21. Literally, Genesis 21 and Galatians 4 go hand in hand. Paul is literally very well known of the Torah, very well known of the Old Testament, and he quotes it over and over. So, unless you understand the Old Testament, you will never understand Paul's letters. There's no way, like, no way. Genesis 17:18. And Abraham said to the Most High, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And this is him again, once again, imploring him, like, don't kill him. Like, I know I did this in my own doing, but we know that just shows like the mercy, the same mercy the Most High has. Abraham felt it, like that's still my son. And we see how the Most High comes through. But again, the seed comes through Isaac. Matthew 1:2. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. And Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. And I kept it at 2. But if we keep reading, we know Messiah comes from the line of Judah. And again, son of the seed, of promise, of faith, right? That's the whole purpose of Isaac. The whole purpose of Isaac was to bring Messiah. It wasn't to bring Jewish people. Period. Let's just go back to the whole point of the matter. The purpose of the seed of promise was to create a line of righteous people to bring Messiah. And then it's through faith. Isaac was a son of faith because in order to go back to the tree of life, it's through faith. So the sons of Abraham, because Abraham is our forefather, is the father of faith. It's through faith. It's not a bloodline thing, which sadly, churches in general, Christianity, Catholicism, you name it, they have missed the whole point. And they separate the church from Israel. As a matter of fact, they place Israel in a whole other level, like the state of Israel over there. It's just like, oh, holy grail. And again, I have nothing against, this is not, whose bloodline is better and this is not even about that. It's who is grafted in and who isn't. That's it. You could be over there, you could be over here. The apple of his eye is a believing people. Period. Yes. From all, what does Revelation says? From all nations, tribes, and tongues.
Ooh, come on.
It's not just one people. All right, anyway, so Luke 3:34, again, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the son of Terah, the son of Nahor. Again, it's just to see the bloodline that led to Messiah. Romans 9:7-8, nor are they all children. Nor are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham. Are you guys understanding this? I don't know how Christianity reads this and still says, but Israel is the people. But anyway, nor are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham. But in Isaac, your seed shall be called. It's faith. That's what Paul was trying to talk about. That is, those who are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of the Most High, but the children of the promise are counted as seed. And what was the promise? Through faith. Point blank.
There's also another verse, I can't remember right now, but it's in the New Testament too, and it says that if you are in Messiah, then you are also like Abraham's seed.
I believe that's Ephesians.
Yes, I know
it's Paul. For sure it's Paul. Paul is the one that goes in deep with that, like deep. Paul is the man who literally went into the Gentile nations and called them Israelites.
Yes.
Like literally fellow Israelites. In other words, and people miss that. Like he literally said, you are co-heirs with Israel. Yes. Like, hello. Okay. Hebrews 11:18, of whom it was said, in Isaac and your seed shall be called. Genesis 16:10. Then the angel of the Adon said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly so that they shall not be counted for multitude. Genesis 17:12. 20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget to a princess and I will make him a great nation. But you guys have to understand something about this. This is a beautiful blessing he gives Ishmael, right? The line of Ishmael. However, there's only one nation. In the Most High Spirit, you are either of the nation of Israel, meaning spiritual Israel, not a physical country. You're either of his nation or you are of the nations. In other words, he made him a great nation, but in order to be grafted in the nation, they need to also believe because it's not by bloodline. Once again,
Yes.
Genesis 21:18. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him with your hands, for I will make him a great nation. And this is what we just read. But I just want to see something really quick. I'm reading Genesis 21. Sorry, guys. Hold on. I think I may have skipped. Okay. Okay, I'm connecting already. Yeah, I'm connecting all the way through to verses 12 and 13, by the way. I got a little bit excited. But verses 12 and 13, let's just reread them so we know what we're. Okay, so verse 12, but the Most High said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman because he is your seed. So you see here the distinction, like he is your seed. I'm going to bless him, but the promise is not him. It's through faith. It's not of the flesh. So that's the distinct that those are the connecting precepts I'm just reading right now. Lastly, connecting with that. Yeah, I'm gonna see it now. Genesis 25:12 through 18. Now, this is a genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael. Okay, I'm not gonna read all the names. We're gonna skip all the names, but basically, if you count it, there were 12. Okay? Very similar to the 12 tribes of Israel. Yes. Let me see the chat really quick. Okay. I don't know whose iPhone though. Hi, iPhone. If you could share your name. Okay, John 8:35. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. This is Messiah's words. This is, hold on. This is connecting with verse 14 where it says, so Abraham, verse 14. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and putting it on the shoulder, he gave it to the boy, he gave it and the boy to Hagar and sent her away. Then she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. By the way, there's not by coincidence that she went to this place as well. Remember the covenant he does with Abimelech later?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying. Go ahead. You were gonna say?
I was gonna say how like when you said the verse about the stranger, I thought about the tabernacle and how the priest could only enter the tabernacle. And right now we are the chosen royal priesthood. But so if you're grafted in, you're the priesthood. So you literally carry that tabernacle. But back then, if you were not a priest, you could not go in there.
Yes,
You were
absolutely.
stranger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Love that connection. Love that connection. The Gentiles are actually in within the tabernacle specifics. We're not supposed to even enter in the courtyard. They were supposed to stay in the outer courts.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah. And the tabernacle represents us.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're a Gentile, then how are you going to make it? You know what I mean? Like there's a contradiction of terms. D, I see it's you. For some reason, it shows iPhone and then it shows your name. So weird. But hi, D. All right, let's continue. Verse 15. Yes, where am I? No, I'm going to actually read verse 17. And the most I heard the voice of the lad. By the way, lad is like a young man. Yeah. We know it says boy here, and it kind of sounds like he was a little child, but really he wasn't. If you do the math, when Isaac was born, he was already 13 years. No, he was more than 13 because he got circumcised at 13. And then later Isaac is born and he's circumcised, I believe. So maybe Ishmael's what, like 14, 15 when Isaac is born, something like that. Yeah. And then a couple years later, because we're seeing here that he was messing around with Isaac, so Isaac was already not a baby. I'm thinking a young child. So the lad Ishmael, we're talking about maybe he was like late teens or even early 20s. So just so you have because we always tend to read these things and see him like, oh, this little young baby went with his mom to the desert. No, he was older. He was a grown ass. Oh, sorry, Ash. Anyway, all right. Let's continue. Let's not get sidetracked. So connecting with verse 17 again, then the angel of the Most High called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, "What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for the Most High has heard your voice. No, has heard the voice of the lad where he is." So he hears the voice of Ishmael, right? Connecting with that, Exodus 3:7. And the Adon said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And this is such a foreshadowing too, because my people who are in Egypt is kind of like the children of the flesh in a spiritual sense, because we are to come out of Egypt later on. So it's, yeah, it all goes back to kind of making those connections of spiritual Egypt. And yes, he's talking about a physical one here in the book of Exodus. However, it all connects. It all connects. Deuteronomy 26:7. Then we cried out to the Adon, the God of our fathers, and the Adon heard our voice and looked on our affliction and our labor and our oppression. And once again, he's always listening to his children. Whether you are in covenant or not yet in covenant, whenever you cry out to him, he listens. And that's the whole point of even the lad Ishmael crying out. He was heard. That's why, that chapter that we read with Hagar, when she first got kicked out, because this is the second time they get kicked out, by the way. When she first got kicked out, it says that, you are the God. Like that's how it says in the Bible, you are the God who hears, because he heard her.
That's your car competition.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Scripture that says he is close to the brokenhearted, the crushed spirit.
Yes.
That part. His word does not come back.
And crying out is kind of like a way of surrender too. Like you desperately need him, you know. Genesis 22:11. But the angel of the Adon called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. So this is connecting still with the same, yeah. This is still connecting with verse 17. Sorry, now it's verse 18. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him with your hands, for I will make him a great nation. So now connecting with 18, we just, I'm not going to read them because this is just confirming over and over that he would multiply your descendants exceedingly, whether they were through Ishmael or through Isaac. And Genesis 21 as well, he confirms it. Yet I will also make him a nation. Yeah, because he is your seed, right? Genesis 25:12-16, we see that. We see the genealogy of, once again, of Ishmael. And we see how he had many, many, many children, and they multiply like little bunnies. So then we have verse 19. Oh, that's so nice. Chelsea's sharing, I needed that. After coming out of Christianity, questioned of my prayers were heard, but they were even in my ignorance. Yes, of course. And you know what's the beautiful thing about prayer? That we tend to think that prayer has to be done certain way or sound certain way even, or be performed certain way for us to be heard. When we see in scriptures like Hannah, it's such a perfect example how she literally could not even speak. If you read the story in First Samuel, it says that she looked like she was drunk, like to Eli the priest, because all she was doing was weeping. She couldn't even utter the words of her pain inside. But it says the Most High heard her prayer. So what does that mean? That prayer doesn't have to sound certain way. Sometimes it's just the posture of our heart, and he hears us. He is the Elohim, the God who hears. And so I'm not saying with that, don't pray out loud. I'm not saying that. I believe there's power in that even because there's power in our words, right? However, it doesn't mean that just because you're praying in your thoughts that he's not hearing you. He totally is. It's a matter of the heart and and the posture of your heart. So yes, Chelsea. Yes. That's something that I've had to like remove too because where I come from, I had to basically I was you know what's funny because they would criticize a lot of Catholicism and like oh they're praying vain repetitions and basically in a way we were doing the same thing. They were teaching us to do the same thing, vain repetitions. Yet we sounded different. We sounded powerful, but at least me, I speak for myself. It was so vain, and even vague because at one point I wasn't even feeling anything. I was just doing it because I'm supposed to pray this way. Yes. I mean, yes, he is good for sure. All right, let's continue. Where was I? What was the last verse?
19.
Okay, 19, thank you. Did I read 19? Oh, okay. So then the Most High opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. That is also so crazy to me. So crazy to me. Remember the Samaritan woman too? Where did she meet Messiah? At the well of water. A Gentile woman. Come on. So, huh? Yes, and he meets her there. So, ooh, he opens her eyes and she saw a well of water, meaning he opened her natural eyes, but more so I feel her spiritual eyes.
I think Paul when he was blind and he opened his eyes.
Yeah, but she saw a well of water. Paul saw Messiah, which is the same thing. And she went and she filled the skin with water and gave the lad to drink. Again, yes, we know it was physical. He was obviously thirsty, drink, but everything is twofold. This is super spiritual because he is the living waters.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
And I will give you, right? The thing with the word is that everything connects and it foreshadows and it's like, hello, he is the living waters. He is the living waters. Oh my goodness. And then it says, well, let's just connect 19. Let me see. I have connecting with 19, Genesis 3:7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. This is obviously when they sinned. This is going back to the beginning, right? And they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. So this opening of the eyes, in this case, was something else. But what the point of this is that there is a connection with the him opening her eyes to see. Adam and Eve eyes were open and they saw that they were naked, but understand that that was also spiritual. I don't know if you guys understand. Okay. Numbers 22:31. Then the Adon opened Balaam's eyes, huh? Let me read this one and see if you can. Okay. Then the Adon opened Balaam's eyes. Balaam was not a good person, by the way. He was another king, Balak, was wanting to send to curse Israel on his behalf, right? And Balaam was one of the magicians that were with Pharaoh in the times of Moses. So, but look what it says. Then the Adon opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Adon standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. In other words, the Most High is the one who opens the eyes. What I was trying to say about Balaam in his case, he wasn't a righteous person. In the case of Adam and Eve, they sinned and their eyes were opened, but the one who opened them, I believe, was also the Father. It wasn't a result of their sin. It was a result of, okay, now you're going to see what you've done. You understand? I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, because they weren't supposed to partake of the fruit. And we have a whole other theory on that fruit. But yeah, but let's not derail. Okay, so 2 Kings 6:17. And Elisha prayed and said, Adon, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Adon opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. This was spiritual vision. Okay, when it speaks about the eyes being open, though they might be physically open, it's also spiritual. Like for example, in the case of um the guy that was blind that came to Messiah, he puts mud on his eyes and does the whole, the whole thing. And then he sees, at first he says, "What do you see?" And he says, "I see men as trees."
Yeah.
And then he says, "See again." And then obviously he sees normal. There's two layers of seeing. There's spiritual and there's physical. Even with that, he will see men as trees. There's a connection with that. The spiritual. All right, Luke 24:31. Then their eyes were opened and they knew him. You see? And he vanished from their sight. This is when he resurrects and later on, later on, later on. Um, but yes, the eyes being open is a representation of spiritual eyes being open. Genesis 28:15, behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. I think I may be reading there. This is connecting with verse 20, actually. Verse 20, where it says, so the Most High was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. So this goes back to that same promise in Genesis, that he actually gives to the children of Abraham, that he will always keep them, right? That included Ishmael as well. Genesis 39:2-3, connecting with verse 20 as well. The Adon was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Adon was with him, and that the Adon made all he did to prosper in his hand. But the Adon was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So Joseph was a son of Jacob, which Jacob was a son of Isaac, the seed of promise, right? However, Joseph ends up in Egypt, okay, which is the same place that Ishmael also goes.
Yes.
And then this is just to connect how he's with his children no matter where they are. Because it's not a thing about a bloodline. It's a promise of covenant. Genesis 16:12, he shall be a wild man, his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. A promise again to Ishmael beforehand. Verse 21, he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of, again, Egypt. And we know that Hagar was also an Egyptian, but she was part of Abraham's family. So, verse 21, we just have Genesis 24, verse 4, but you shall go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac. We see that the parents are the ones that take the wife for their children. And we see that the same way that Hagar took a wife for Ishmael, Abraham later does the same for Isaac. Okay, that's just what I wanted to point there. Verse 22. And again, I'm going to recap all this with slides at the end. I'm just doing all the connections now, so it makes more sense when I do the big summary at the end, okay? So verse 22, and it came to pass at the time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, the Most High is with you in all that you do. And that's just connecting with that. Genesis 20, verse 2 and 14. Now Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Then Abimelech took sheep, oxen, and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham. And he restored Sarah, his wife, to him. This is just recapping from last time we did the study that Abimelech almost took his wife by mistake. And then when he sees what he had done, he not only gives her back, but gives Abraham many possessions. So Genesis 26:28, later we see, but they said, we have certainly seen that the Adon is with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you. So we see that the same people who bless Abraham now want to make a covenant. This is literally what we just read on verse 22. Now want to make the same exact person, Abimelech, wants to make a covenant with him because of how blessed Abraham became. Isaiah 8:10, take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the word, but it will not stand, for the Most High is with us. In other words, they understood that, like that they served the Most High God. Literally understood that. Verse 23. Now therefore swear to me by the Most High that you will not deal falsely with me, with my offspring. This is Abimelech speaking. or with my posterity, but that according to the kindness that I have done to you, what we just read, right? That I have done to you, you will do to me and to the land in which you have dwelt. So Abraham, we see that he swears that. He agrees to that. So connecting with that, we have Joshua 2:12. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Adon, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. And this is later on. Oh my gosh, what's her name? Rahab. Rahab is her name. The woman who hides ah when they were gonna conquer the promised land, the land of Canaan. She hides um Joshua and his teammates, basic teammates, and some of the tribes, right? So they don't get killed, etc. So she then says, "Please show me kindness, the same kindness that I showed to you." And we know that as a result of that, she's included in the bloodline of Messiah later. All right, First Samuel 24:21. Therefore, swear now to me by the Adon that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not destroy my name from my father's house. So again, we see that repetitive like asking from kings, from people of power, like swear to me that that you're gonna have mercy on my bloodline, on my people, and it all goes back to them understanding who they represent. That's basically what's happening here. Um, verse 25. Then Abraham rebuked Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized. And I'm going to actually read 26 as well, where it says, and Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing you did not tell me, nor had I heard of until this day. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. So in other words, they made a covenant based on he trusted Abimelech's word. And then connecting with that, we have Genesis 26. I'm not gonna read all this. This is just basically going back to the times let me see. Oh, actually, no, this is not going back. This is forward. This is with Isaac. I'm gonna read it. Now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they had filled them with earth. So remember the covenant we just read on 21. Later on with Isaac, we see them like messing around with that, with you promised. And Isaac dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. He called them by the names which his father had called them. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, the water is ours. So he called the name of the well Isaac, because they quarreled with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, because he said, for now the Adon has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. So we see that this whole covenant that Abimelech does with Abraham later goes to shambles with the posterior generations. That's basically what I want to point there. Verse 27. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech. Okay, this is about a covenant. Genesis 26:31. Then they arose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another, and Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Again, swearing an oath is the same as making like a covenant with the person. Genesis 31:44. Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between me and you. We also see that with Jonathan and David in 1 Samuel 18:3. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. So basically, these covenants are not the same to say, because a lot of people will take this out of context and say, oh, we made a covenant together. Really, the only covenants that the Most High has ever really truly proclaimed to be true covenants are the ones made with him, and then in marriage, which signifies how he is married to his church, right? Those are the only covenants. Everything else, that it's like making an oath, like making those other covenants that you see in these other parts of scriptures is basically saying, making a promise. I promise you that I'm never gonna you know kill your people or get rid of your generation or da 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 da, right? But it's not to say that it's the same as his covenant that he's made with his people. All right. So, verse 29. Then Abimelech asked Abraham, "What is the meaning of these seven ewe lambs which you have set by themselves?" And we see an example of that, Genesis 33:8, that Esau did the same thing. Then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord." You see how I mean my Lord? This is referring to a person over here. So basically that's what Abraham was doing with here on verse 29, what Abraham was doing with the lambs to find favor with Abimelech. Um, verse 30. And he said, "You will take these seven ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be witness that I have dug this well." We see in Genesis 31, 48 and 52. Where is Genesis 31? Oh, here. And Laban, and another example with Laban. This is the father-in-law of Isaac. And Laban said, "His heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore, its name was called Galid. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness that I will not pass beyond this heap, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm." So, in other words, they would use things or animals as witnesses. Like this is basically the witness that I'm using that we're keeping this promise or whatever. Verse 33, where it says, "Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba." And there's a few connections here. I'm gonna try to like fly through them so we can wrap it up. Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba. This name Beersheba. Remember I said that's funny that that's where the Egyptian Hagar went. And there called on the name of the Adon, the everlasting Elohim. Verse 33, Genesis 4:26. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then the men began to call on the name of the Adon. We know that that's the beginning of when men, after the fall of man, meaning when Cain did what he did, and then the righteous seed, which was Seth, came. This is when they began to call on his name. Genesis 12:8, and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel west of Ai on the east, and he built an altar, and there he calls on the name of the Adon, as well as Genesis 13:4. He makes another altar and calls on the name of the Adon. We know that this was Abraham as well. Genesis 26:25, this is Isaac. So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Adon. And he dug, Isaac's servants dug a well. Genesis 35:11, also the Most High said to him, "I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body." Exodus 15:18, "The Adon shall reign forever and ever." Deuteronomy 32:40, "For I raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever." This is speaking of the covenant. This has all to do with covenant. Deuteronomy 33:27, "The eternal Elohim is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will thrust out the enemy from before you and will say, destroy." Psalms 92, "Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the worlds, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are the Most High." Psalms 93:2, "Your throne is established from old, you are everlasting." Isaiah 40, verse 28, "Have you not known, have you not heard, the everlasting Elohim, the Adon, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable." Jeremiah 10:10, "But the Adon is the true God. He is the living Elohim and the everlasting King. And at his wrath, the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to endure his indignation." Habakkuk 1:12, "Are you not from everlasting, O Adon, my Elohim, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Adon, you have appointed them for judgment. O Rock, you have marked them for correction." Hebrews 13:8, "Yahshua HaMashiach, the same yesterday, today, and forever." And this is just connecting that he called on the Adon, the everlasting God. Now, just going to summarize everything up real quick. Oh, let me move this out of the way. These are going to be quick. Verses 1 through 2, we see the promise fulfilled. In other words, the Most High keeps his word exactly as spoken. Not going to read the verses because we read them already, but basically, the birth of Isaac was not random. It happened at the appointed time set by the Most High. It's always at his appointed time, by the way. The insight of this, the delay was intentional. I believe so. The promise came when it was humanly impossible, so the glory belongs fully to the Most High. And that's always how he operates. I don't know if y'all noticed. It's always when something is impossible that he brings forth his promise.
Yes.
Like Mary bearing his seed,
Yeah.
like Joseph's mom being also sterile, like also Hannah being sterile with for there's so many stories of just him using those type of wombs. So verse 3, Isaac, the named promise, right? We see that the name was predetermined, like we spoke about. We see that Isaac literally means laughter. This name carries both past doubt and present fulfillment. The prophetic layer is that what began in disbelief is transformed into joy and testimony. So the sign of the covenant, what is it? Circumcising Isaac on the eighth day. We see that Abraham obeys immediately. And we see that the covenant is not just promised, it is marked and lived out in obedience. Okay, so it's again faith plus works. If you believe, you do. Abraham's age, we know that he was 100 years old. So this confirms the birth was supernatural, not by human strength. We see verses 6 through 7 that laughter turned to rejoicing. That's what we broke down in these verses. The Septuagint insight says that laugh equals rejoicing. Sarah's laughter is now, not doubt, but public joy and testimony. The connection was that the Most High restores, what the Most High restores become a testimony for others. Hallelujah. All right, verse 9, Ishmael and Isaac, flesh versus promise. The Masoretic text, which is the regular Bibles that we all have, right? Reads that Ishmael was mocking. In the Septuagint, it says that he was playing, which I think is more like fooling around, like, right? Messing around. Spiritual meaning, and I forgot to Targums confirms that it was actually like he was messing with him. Spiritual meaning, Galatians clarifies this represents flesh persecuting spirit, which is why I believe Paul mentions it in Galatians. Human effort opposing divine promise. It's super spiritual, guys, which is why he says, which happens still now, right? Which is happening still today. The flesh persecuting the spirit, the human effort persecuting divine promise. Still happens. Verse 10, the separation. We see the casting out of the bondwoman and her son. Hard truth is the inheritance cannot be shared between flesh and the promise. It cannot. Spiritual principle of this, you cannot mix human striving with divine promise. It's only through faith. It's not by works. Yes, the works come as a result of your faith, but you cannot just operate on humanely doing something to earn being part of the seed or salvation altogether. Verses 11 through 13, Abraham's grief and the Most High's clarity. We see that the Most High makes it clear, in Isaac shall your seed be called, yet he still provides for Ishmael. The insight, the Most High is both covenant specific, but he's also merciful to all. And that's what makes him the Most High Almighty. Verse 14, the bondwoman sent away. John 8:35 says the servant does not remain in the house forever. What does that mean? Symbolism. Hagar represents bondage, a temporary dwelling, which is why she goes to Egypt. Isaac represents sonship, inheritance, which is why he goes into the promised land. Verses 17 and 18, the Most High hears. Remember what I said? The Most High heard the voice of the lad, right? What we just read.
Sorry, I love this because even like when it says that Hagar represents bondage, and then Egypt is the house of bondage.
Yes.
For like literally slaves.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I love that connection.
You said temporary dwelling. I was thinking about how we're temporarily dwelling in these tabernacles or the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. And we're literally in prison still, if you think about it, in this flesh.
Yeah. The eighth day, like we will not be in that temporary dwelling.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And by the way, we've spoken about the whole circumcision of the flesh is while it was symbolic in those days, it needed to be physically a representation. Right now, we know that it's more a circumcision of our hearts because it's spiritual. We are, and the whole idea of circumcision of the foreskin is because that represents the flesh. And if you think about it, well, he wasn't here, but if you think about it, it goes back to what was the original sin? All right. So even outside the covenant line, I think I threw him off, but we'll talk about that after. Even outside the covenant line, this is the whole point of this. The Most High hears cries of distress, even outside the covenant line. That's what we're speaking about. So spiritual sight open. Speaking about, remember the eyes opening? The Most High opened her eyes. Provision was already there. She just could not see it yet. The spiritual principle, sometimes the need is not provision, but revelation. Genesis 16, 12, and 39, 2 to 3 says the Most High was with the lad. Verses 20 through 21 is Ishmael's future. Even outside the covenant line, there was his presence, his provision, and a promise fulfilled that he gave to Abraham, that he would be with him, right? So now summing up the last verses, 22 through 24, we see Abimelech recognizes the hand of the Most High. And he said, the Most High is with you in all that you do. So the insight, even unbelievers can recognize divine favor. Verses 23 through 31, the oath covenant of peace. The key Hebrew word here is shabbat, which means to swear an oath, right? Which is what I was saying is different than a covenant done with the Most High, right? So important note, Genesis 21:27 is one of the earliest examples of a formal covenant agreement, meaning what it means is a national league, okay? Now, speaking of Beersheba, which is the well of the oath, it's a symbolism. We spoke about water equals life, oath equals covenant. And together, life secured through covenant, because he is the tree of life. And whoo! All right, verse 33, the everlasting Elohim, lastly, right? Abraham calls on the everlasting Elohim, which is El Olam, meaning eternal, unchanging, outside of time, which is why we read all the verses we read at the end. Connection, the promise is not temporary, it is rooted in eternity. And that's the whole part, and that's the whole promise of the seed. That's why it has to be spiritual. Because we don't belong in this earth. If it was physical, if the promise was to the son of flesh, then it means that a promise ends in this life. But the promise is of faith because it's not in this life, it goes on to eternity. It is spiritual. Does that make sense? Well, yes, he through him are we now grafted in. Absolutely. Genesis 21 reveals a powerful truth. In a nutshell, the Most High is not just a promise keep maker, he is a promise keeper. This chapter teaches us that what is born of the flesh cannot inherit what is born of the spirit. The promises of the Most High come at the appointed time. Separation is often required to walk fully in covenant. Even in the wilderness seasons, he sees, hears, and provides. From laughter of doubt to rejoicing in fulfillment, from conflict to covenant, from wilderness to provision, the hand of the Most High is evident in every detail. Thank you for breaking bread with us. I pray that it wasn't too much and that you're able to understand what this bread of life brings to us. Truly, the whole purpose of this walk is to go back to the beginning, which is what Genesis literally means, Bereshit, in the beginning, to go back to the Garden of Eden, which is literally the New Jerusalem that will descend from the heavens to this earth, for us to dwell there forever. But it's a spiritual life. That's why we have to be spiritually grafted in to the tree of life. So much shalom, my peoples. Thank you for connecting once again. Thank you for sticking around in this live. And I'll see you guys next week. Let me end the recording. Oh, I had seen, wait. Let me just say one more thing. Chelsea had said circumcision equals important due to the OG sin. Oh, the original sin been taking the seed of their serpent. Yes. Oh, she got the revelation. Your eyes have been opened, girl. I love it. I love it. That's how he works. All right, let me end the recording. Where is it? Oh, here. I'll see you guys, the ones that are catching the replay. See you next week. Shalom.